On an autumn afternoon, Emily Harrison's home in a quiet residential neighborhood in the Chicago suburbs was wrapped in peaceful tranquility. She sat by the large window in the living room, watching her 8-year-old daughter Sophia playing in the yard. Sophia's bright laughter carried on the autumn breeze. The little girl with blonde hair braided into pigtails was gathering fallen leaves and tossing them into the air, playing happily by herself. "I should be able to come home early today." At the sound of her husband Michael's voice from the entrance, Emily turned around. He ran his own IT company and was usually home late, but today he had returned while the sun was still high, quite unusual for him. "Welcome home. You must be tired." Emily stood up with a smile to greet her husband. Michael smiled gently and gave her a light kiss on the forehead. These simple moments were the most precious times for Emily. 10 years into their marriage, their relationship was still as warm as their newlywed days, filled with caring for each other. "Daddy." Sophia came running in from the yard, her small hands clutching colorful fallen leaves. Michael picked up his daughter and lifted her high. Sophia laughed with delight. "Look, I collected all these beautiful leaves." "That's wonderful, Sophia. They're colored like a rainbow." Michael looked at each leaf in his daughter's small hands, praising them carefully. Even during his busy work schedule, he always made time for Sophia a priority. Emily felt truly happy watching this heartwarming exchange between father and daughter. While preparing dinner, her cell phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Emily answered the phone with some hesitation. "Hello, Emily." The moment she heard that voice, Emily's hands trembled. It was the voice of her mother, Margaret Williams, whom she hadn't been in contact with for 10 years. Her 62-year-old mother had strongly opposed Emily's marriage, and they had been out of touch ever since. "Mom? Why are you calling so suddenly?" "Emily, listen. I've become ill." Margaret's voice was shaking. It was completely different from her usual intimidating tone, weak and frail. Emily listened to her mother's words, though she was shaken. "The doctor told me I have heart disease and lung problems, and I don't have much time left. He said living alone is dangerous and I should recuperate with family." Emily was at a loss for words. No matter how bad their relationship had become, her mother was still her mother. Guilt welled up from deep in her chest. 10 years ago, her mother had indeed stubbornly opposed Emily's marriage. She had been dissatisfied with Michael's profession and financial situation, repeatedly saying, "There must be someone better for you." Exhausted by her mother's controlling personality and interference, Emily had decided to distance herself when she got married. "Mom, that's..." "Please, Emily. I have no one else to turn to. You're my daughter, aren't you?" Margaret's voice had a weakness and desperation Emily had never heard before. Emily gripped the receiver, overcome by complex emotions. After hanging up, Emily explained the situation to Michael. He listened quietly and finally said calmly, "I understand how you feel. But she's family. Let's put aside what happened before and help your mother." Emily's eyes welled up with tears at Michael's kindness and understanding. She squeezed her husband's hand and nodded slightly. "You're right. Maybe this time with her grandmother will become something precious for Sophia too." That night, as the family of 3 sat around the dining table, Emily explained about her grandmother to Sophia. "Grandma is sick, and she's going to live with us for a while." "Grandma?" Sophia's eyes lit up. For her, who had never met her grandmother, it probably felt like a new adventure. "Yes. I'm sure she'll have lots of stories to tell you." Emily answered with a smile, but anxiety was swirling in the depths of her heart. Would they really be able to bridge the 10-year gap? And would living with her mother really work out? However, believing in the bonds of family, Emily decided to accept the beginning of this new chapter. 3 days later in the afternoon, Emily was waiting at the front door for her mother's arrival. Michael had left work early to come home, and Sophia had changed clothes immediately after returning from school, preparing to welcome her grandmother. Emily's chest was filled with complex emotions.
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
Anxiety about seeing her mother for the first time in 10 years mixed with the sense of responsibility of welcoming her sick mother. When a white van stopped in front of the house, a staff member from a care service got out of the driver's seat. Then, from the back seat, the figure of her mother Margaret in a wheelchair appeared. Emily gasped. In her 10-year-old memories, her mother was a dignified woman who held her back straight. But what she saw before her now was an elderly woman with hollow cheeks and a pale complexion, clearly suffering from illness. "Mom." Emily ran over and took her mother's hands as she sat in the wheelchair. Margaret's hands were surprisingly cold and bony. "Emily, thank you. Really, thank you." Margaret's voice was weak, completely different from her previously strong tone. Tears welled up in her eyes. Emily felt her own eyes getting hot. The past resentment seemed to matter little in this moment. "Grandma." Sophia came flying out energetically. She crouched down beside the wheelchair and stared intently at Margaret's face. "You must be Sophia. What a beautiful child you are." Margaret touched Sophia's cheek with her trembling hand. In that moment, her expression softened. It was the first time Emily had seen such a gentle expression on her mother's face. "Sophia, Grandma is tired, so speak to her gently." When Michael gently explained to his daughter, Sophia nodded slightly. "Grandma, I'll show you my room. But it can be another time." Margaret smiled slightly. That smile reminded Emily of her mother's smile she had seen as a child. They had prepared the first-floor guest room as her mother's room. The bed and necessary medical equipment were arranged, and from the window, you could see the beautiful view of the garden. Margaret looked around the room and shed tears again. "Thank you for preparing such a wonderful room. Even though I did such terrible things to all of you." Emily took her mother's hand. "Mom, that's all in the past now. Just focus on getting better." That night, the family sat around the dining table together for the first time in a long while, all four of them. Margaret could barely eat, but she seemed happy listening to the family's conversation. "Sophia, how's school? Do you have a favorite subject?" "I like math and art. I have homework to draw a picture of my family. Can I include Grandma too?" "Of course. I'd be honored." Margaret's eyes moistened again. Emily watched this scene and began to think that perhaps her mother had really changed. From the next day, Emily devoted herself to caring for her mother, managing medications, helping with meals, accompanying her to regular doctor visits. Margaret always expressed gratitude and was concerned about Emily's burden. "Emily, you have work too, don't you? Don't worry about me." "It's fine, Mom. I can work from home." Emily worked as a freelance graphic designer and often worked from home. Even while caring for her mother, she was able to continue working somehow. About a week later, Margaret called Emily to her room. "Emily, sit down. There's something I want to talk about." Emily sat in the chair beside her mother's bed. Margaret took Emily's hand with her thin hands. "About what happened 10 years ago, I'm truly sorry. Opposing your marriage, saying bad things about Michael. I was wrong." Emily was surprised. Her mother had never apologized so frankly before. "Michael is truly a kind man. He treasures you. And Sophia is such a wonderful child. You've built a happy family." "Mom. I was stubborn and controlling. I couldn't stand it when things didn't go my way. But when I became ill and spent long hours alone, I finally realized what was truly important." Tears flowed down Margaret's cheeks. Emily was crying too. "Mom, I was wrong too. We should have talked more. Not being in contact for 10 years. No, you were right. By keeping distance, I was able to reflect on myself. It might be too late, but... Mother and daughter embraced, releasing emotions they had kept bottled up for so long. After that, the family relationships gradually improved. Margaret began telling Sophia old stories and drawing pictures together. Emily also increasingly shared childhood photos and laughed together over memories. However, there were occasionally things that bothered her. Sometimes at night, there were sounds from her mother's room. She thought it was the sound of going to the bathroom, but sometimes the sound seemed strangely light. Also, she was increasingly forgetting to take her medications. When Emily pointed this out, she would apologize saying, "Sorry, I forgot," but sometimes there seemed to be some other emotion in her expression. "Mom, how are you feeling? You seem a bit better." One day, when Emily asked this, Margaret showed a panicked expression. "No, not yet. The doctor said so too, didn't he? That I must rest." Emily felt a slight uneasiness at her mother's expression then. However, a sick person's condition fluctuates, and it was good that her mother was getting even a little better. Emily tried to convince herself that her suspicions were due to fatigue. Michael had also noticed the change in her mother. "Mom, you seem much more energetic. Your appetite has improved too." "Yes, thanks to all of you. But I'm still worried about my heart. I can't overdo it." Margaret smiled weakly, but Michael sensed something theatrical about it. However, he too considered it part of the recovery process and didn't pursue it deeply. Only Sophia purely enjoyed the time with her grandmother. When she returned from school, she would head straight to her grandmother's room to report on the day's events. This had become her daily routine. Margaret also seemed to genuinely enjoy the time with her granddaughter. "Grandma, why don't we all go on a picnic this weekend?" "That sounds lovely, Sophia. But Grandma is in a wheelchair." "It's okay, there's a park that's accessible by wheelchair. Daddy looked it up for us." Margaret showed a slightly troubled expression but quickly smiled. "Well then, if the weather is nice, let's go." Emily felt hopeful that her relationship with her mother was being repaired. It would take time to fill the 10-year gap, but by spending more time together as a family like this, she believed they could surely regain true family bonds. About 3 weeks after the cohabitation began, changes appeared in Sophia's behavior. She no longer rushed to her grandmother's room as before and sometimes showed anxious expressions. Emily was worried about her daughter's change but thought it was temporary until she got used to the new environment. One night, while Emily was preparing breakfast for the next day in the kitchen, Sophia appeared in her pajamas. The clock showed 10 o'clock. "Sophia? What's wrong? It's time for bed." "Mama." Sophia pulled at her mother's sleeve with a hesitant expression. Emily noticed that her small hands were trembling slightly. "What's wrong? Does your stomach hurt?" "No. Mama, Grandma, something strange." Sophia spoke in a small voice, as if afraid someone might hear her. Emily crouched down in front of her daughter and asked gently. "Strange? What do you mean?" "During the day, she sits in the wheelchair and says she's very tired, right? But at night, she walks around normally. I've seen it." Emily was confused. Her mother had certainly been explained by the doctor as having difficulty walking due to heart disease and lung problems. However, walking a little to go to the bathroom at night could be a sign of recovery, couldn't it? That's because Mom's condition is gradually getting better. Isn't that good? "But, Mama." Grandma was talking to someone on the phone. She said, "According to plan." Sophia's words planted a small seed of doubt in Emily's heart. However, it might be an 8-year-old child's mishearing. "Sophia, maybe you had a bad dream. Grandma is sick, and we're taking care of her." "But..." Sophia started to say something but swallowed her words. Emily hugged her daughter. It's okay. Grandma is family. You don't need to worry. That night, even after getting into bed, Emily couldn't get Sophia's words out of her head. She considered consulting with Michael, but reconsidered, thinking it wasn't good to suspect her mother based on a child's imaginative story. The next morning, Margaret appeared in the dining room in her wheelchair as usual. Her complexion was still poor, and she barely touched her breakfast. "Mom, how are you feeling today?" "Not very good. I couldn't sleep well at night either." Margaret smiled weakly. Emily felt ashamed for doubting her daughter's words. Before her was clearly a mother suffering from illness. However, that night, Emily happened to witness a suspicious scene. She had woken up thirsty in the middle of the night and was heading to the kitchen for water. Walking down the hallway, she noticed a faint light leaking from her mother's room. Peering through the crack in the door, she could see Margaret talking on the phone. "Yes, it's going smoothly. If I take a little more time, they'll trust me completely." Emily held her breath. Her mother's voice was completely different from the weak voice during the day. It was clear and strong. "Linda, don't worry. I've already gotten a copy of this house's deed. Now I just need to practice the signature." Linda. That was her mother's sister, Emily's aunt's name. Emily hadn't seen her aunt for over 10 years. She too had been one of those who opposed Emily's marriage. "Yes, I found out where the safe is. I can investigate while Michael is working in his study every night." Emily's blood ran cold. Her mother had been investigating the location of the safe. She had been talking about the house deed. And the meaning of practicing signatures was. "The plan is going smoothly. Soon, I'll have this whole house and all the assets." Margaret stood up and walked around the room. The wheelchair remained in the corner of the room. Her movements were light, not those of a sick person. Emily covered her mouth with trembling hands and quietly returned to her room. Her heart was beating violently, and her breathing became rough. Sophia's words had been true. Her mother was pretending to be sick and deceiving the family. The next morning, Emily acted as if nothing had happened. However, her way of looking at Margaret had completely changed. At the breakfast table, she noticed her mother pretending to take her medicine. She was actually spitting out the medicine she had put in her mouth when wiping with a napkin. "Mom, you seem in good spirits today." Emily said this as a test. Margaret showed a panicked expression for a moment. No, not at all. My chest feels tight." She put her hand to her chest and made a pained expression. However, to Emily, it only looked like acting. After Michael left for work and Sophia went to school, Emily thought she should apologize to her daughter. Sophia had seen through the truth. An 8-year-old child's intuition was sharper than that of a 35-year-old adult. In the early afternoon, when Margaret said she was napping and went into her room, Emily mustered the courage to take action. When Sophia returned from school, her mother called her to her room. "Sophia, about yesterday, I'm really sorry. I should have believed what you said." "Mama, is Grandma really strange?" Anxiety showed in Sophia's large eyes. Emily took her daughter's hands. "Let's find out together. But it's absolutely a secret." At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Margaret had closed the door to her room, saying she was napping. Emily and Sophia quietly walked down the hallway and approached the door to her mother's room. Through the slightly open crack in the door, the two peered inside. At that moment, Emily and Sophia froze with fear. Margaret was walking energetically around the room with a phone in one hand. On the desk, piles of documents were spread out, including copies of the house deed, bank documents, and what appeared to be many sheets of paper where she had practiced Emily's signature. "Linda, it's fine. In just one more week, everything will go as planned." Margaret's voice was strong and intimidating. She was like a different person from the weak mother during the day. Emily is really naive. After ignoring me for 10 years, just pretending to be sick and crying a little, she believes everything. She was talking with a sneer on her face. Emily was speechless with shock. Yes, the doctor's diagnosis is also fake. But it's perfectly done, isn't it? The money I spent was worth it. Margaret picked up the fake diagnosis from the desk and looked at it with satisfaction. I intend to take this house and Michael's company stock, everything. The happy life Emily stole from me, now I'll steal it back. Sophia made a small gasp. Emily squeezed her daughter's hand and quietly urged her to leave. The two of them carefully went up the stairs without making footsteps and headed to Emily's room. Upon entering the room, Sophia flew into her mother's chest and began crying. Emily also hugged her daughter while trembling with fear and despair. The love she had believed in from her mother was fake. The illness was a lie. Everything had been a calculated deception. Mama, I'm scared. Grandma doesn't seem like a real grandma. At Sophia's words, Emily's tears overflowed. Her 8-year-old daughter understood the situation better than adults. It's okay, Sophia. Mama will protect you. I have to talk to Daddy too. Emily took out her cell phone with trembling hands. She needed to contact Michael immediately and think of countermeasures. However, she was confused about where to start and how to explain. Her mother wasn't sick. The love was fake too. And she was targeting the family's assets. Emily's distrust of her mother that she had felt 10 years ago had been correct. Even with blood ties, even with family bonds, that didn't necessarily mean true love. At that moment, footsteps could be heard from downstairs. Margaret seemed to have come out of her room. Emily and Sophia held their breath and considered their next action. First, they needed to gather evidence. Then they had to fight to protect their family. That night, when Michael came home, Emily called him to his study. Sophia was pretending to do homework in her room while actually trembling with fear. Emily told her husband everything she had discovered that day. I can't believe it, your mother. Michael sank deep into his chair. 10 years ago, he had been opposed to marriage by his wife's mother, but he never thought she was such a calculating and malicious person. But Emily, we need solid evidence. If we're wrong, we're not wrong. Emily's voice was full of conviction. Sophia saw it too. We confirmed it with our own eyes. Mom is completely healthy, and everything was acting. Even so, we need physical evidence to do anything legally. Recordings, documents, something. Michael was calm. As a manager of an IT company, he had the habit of prioritizing logical thinking over emotions. Then let's gather evidence. Emily made up her mind. We'll install a hidden camera and record Mom's true behavior. The next day, Michael went out on the pretext of work and purchased a small hidden camera. Meanwhile, Emily took care of her mother as usual. Margaret continued to sit in her wheelchair and maintain her weak act. Emily, I'm really sorry. Causing you so much trouble. That's not true, Mom. We're family, aren't we? Emily held her mother's hand while suppressing her inner disgust. To think that with these hands, she had been planning to target the family's assets at night, it was painful even to touch them. That night, Michael installed the camera near her mother's room. The small device was hidden behind a bookshelf and positioned to record all of Margaret's actions. The next morning, the family checked the recorded footage. Shocking scenes were captured there. At 11 o'clock at night, Margaret stood up from her wheelchair and walked lightly around the room. She spread documents on the desk and practiced Emily's signature. Then she talked on her cell phone with someone for a long time. Linda, I was able to confirm the contents of the safe too. Stock certificates, insurance policies, everything is there. The recording was also clearly preserved. Margaret's voice was strong, not that of a sick person. I can already perfectly mimic Emily's handwriting. I plan to sign the real estate transfer documents next week. In the footage, Margaret was talking with a sneer on her face. That girl is really foolish. After ignoring her mother for 10 years, just pretending to be sick a little, she accepts her. She's bound by blood ties and has lost her judgment. Emily watched the footage while crying. Sophia was trembling slightly on her father's lap. That's enough. Michael stopped the recording. Let's go to the police. Before that, I want to confront her directly. Emily stood up. I want to tell Mom that we know everything. And I want to ask her why she's doing this. It's too dangerous. I'll be fine. You'll be there too, and we have evidence. I'm not afraid anymore. That evening, Emily called her Aunt Linda. Aunt Linda. This is Emily. I need to discuss something about Mom. Can you come to the house tonight? Linda answered with a shaken voice. Emily. What's this about so suddenly? About Mom's illness, we want to have a family discussion. Mom wants to see you too. An hour later, Linda arrived. She was smaller than Margaret but had the same cold eyes. Emily, how is your mother doing? We're about to discuss that. Emily led Linda and Margaret to the living room. Michael and Sophia also attended. Margaret sat in her wheelchair, making her usual weak expression. What's this family discussion about? Margaret asked anxiously. About your illness, Mom. Emily answered calmly. Then she placed a tablet on the table and played the recorded footage. Seeing Margaret's true nature displayed on the screen, both women turned pale. What is this? Margaret tried to make a panicked expression, but acting was no longer effective. Please explain, Mom. Why did you pretend to be sick and deceive us? Why are you targeting our family's assets? Emily's voice was quiet but filled with strong anger. Silence continued. Then Margaret's expression changed. The mask of the weak mother fell away, revealing the true nature of a cold, calculating woman. Oh, I've been found out. Margaret stood up from the wheelchair and walked proudly. Her movements were light, not those of a sick person. Yes, it's all lies. The illness, the regret, the love, all fake. Linda also took on a defiant expression. Emily, you wouldn't understand. How much we've suffered. Suffered? You made a happy marriage, live in a fine house, and got everything. But we have nothing. Margaret's voice was full of anger. 10 years ago, you abandoned me. You cut family ties and became happy by yourself. That was. Shut up. Margaret shouted. You don't understand my feelings. The loneliness of a mother abandoned by her daughter, the poverty, you understand nothing. Mom, I'm just taking back what was stolen from me. This house, the money, I have rights to everything too. Rights? Michael stood up. You have no rights. This is fraud. Fraud? Margaret sneered. I just appealed to family sentiment. Emily was just foolish. Mom. Emily was crying. I loved you. I was really worried about you. Love? Don't make me laugh. After ignoring me for 10 years, now you talk about love. Even so, you're my mother. We have blood ties. Blood ties. Margaret showed a contemptuous expression. Blood ties mean nothing. Only with money and power can people be happy. Sophia said in a small voice, Grandma, we loved you. Margaret looked down at her granddaughter. You're a cute child. But love doesn't put food on the table. That's enough. Michael took out his cell phone. I'm calling the police. Wait. Linda stood up in panic. Let's resolve this through discussion. Not the police. Discussion. Emily shook her head. There's nothing more to discuss. Mom, you're not my family. Even with blood ties, there's no heart connection. Margaret tried to play her last card. Emily, reconsider. I'm really your mother. We can still become a real family. No. Emily's voice was resolute. Real family means loving, respecting, and trusting each other. You don't have that. Michael began calling the police. Margaret and Linda's expressions changed to despair. Their plan had completely failed. The police arrived, and Margaret and Linda were arrested on charges of attempted fraud and document forgery. The investigation revealed that the two had been carrying large gambling debts and had been systematically targeting relatives in planned fraud for years. Margaret's illness was complete fabrication, and the forged diagnosis had been used in other crimes as well. 3 months later, a trial was held. Linda received a prison sentence and was sentenced to 2 years of incarceration. Margaret received a suspended sentence due to being a first-time offender and consideration for her daughter, but was required to undergo treatment at a specialized facility. On the day of sentencing, Emily had a final meeting with her mother. Margaret, sitting behind the transparent partition in the visiting room, was still trying to justify her actions. Emily, I was thinking of you. Mom, stop it. Emily quietly interrupted. I can no longer think of you as my mother. Even with blood ties, without heart ties, that's not family. You're no daughter of mine. Margaret spat out with anger. I disown you. I never want to see you again. Emily felt relief rather than sadness. With these words, she was completely freed from the burden of having a mother. After that, several letters of resentment arrived from Linda in prison. They contained content like, I was just following my sister, and, how can you abandon family? But Emily disposed of them all without reading. 6 months after the incident, on a spring afternoon, Emily was planting flowers in the garden with Sophia. Her daughter, now 9 years old, had recovered from that terrifying experience and had come to value family bonds more than before. Mama, was Grandma really sick? Sophia asked while digging in the soil. Not physically sick. She was sick in her heart. Emily answered gently. A sickness of the heart where you can only think about deceiving and hurting people. So is she better now? I don't know. But it doesn't matter to us. We have real family. At that moment, Michael came home from work. Seeing his wife and daughter working in the garden, he approached with a smile. What are you planting today? Sunflowers, Daddy. Sophia answered happily. When summer comes, big flowers will bloom. Michael picked up his daughter and put his hand on Emily's shoulder. The three of them looked at the sun setting beyond the garden. We're the real family, aren't we? Emily murmured while holding her husband's hand. That's right. Michael embraced her gently. Blood ties aren't everything. Loving each other, supporting each other, trusting each other. That's the real family bond. Sophia, sandwiched between her parents, said in a small voice, we'll always be together, right? Of course. Emily and Michael answered simultaneously. That night, the family of 3 sat around the dining table for dinner. Not 4 people as before, but 3. However, among those 3, there was genuine love and trust without falsehood. How about going on a picnic this weekend? When Michael suggested, Sophia's eyes lit up. That sounds great. Let's make lunch boxes. Let's do that. Emily smiled. Let's spend enjoyable time as a real family. Outside the window, the sunflower seeds planted in the garden were quietly waiting for the time to sprout in the warm spring soil. Like the family that had overcome difficulties, they would surely bloom beautiful flowers in time. The true family bonds formed by love and trust, not bound by blood relations, would never be defeated by any trial.